stopped! The fact that none of you has been able to best them... It's ridiculous!
Linnet sat in the Citadel commander's office, and this time she wasn't alone. Alfreda and Nixie sat beside her, before Cyrene's desk. The Citadel commander scowled at all three of them, and the frustration dripping from her eyes seemed a little, well, okay, a lot uncalled for. The three of them had some fairly good success, all things considered. Alfreda had managed to secure significant amounts of Anam energy before the Sparkle Guardians came to stop her. Nixie had not returned with as much as Alfreda. As for Linnet, thanks to Elvinia's help, Linnet's very first mission had been a great success. Nevertheless, even when Linnet provided her report, Cyrene didn't congratulate her on her victory. Instead, she was quite short with Linnet and wasn't paying attention when she gave her mission report. Cyrene stood up from her chair behind her desk, and she gestured with her finger, pointing it at each of the three operatives in turn.
The district supervisor has been on my ass since you three can't seem to defeat a trio of measly magical boys! It's actually quite embarrassing. I don't understand why you three can't beat them! Please, tell me what I can do to alleviate your continuous string of failures!
We didn't fail.
Both Nixie and Alfreda cleared their throats and gave Linnet narrowed eyes. Nixie even shook her head.
Oh, no! Don't stop her! It looks like the person with the least experience has something to say to the Citadel Commander! Go on, sweetie. Finish what you were going to say.
Alfreda bit her lip, and she averted her eyes to the side, while Nixie just lowered her gaze and let her eyes go unfocused.
I was just going to say that we didn't fail exactly. We managed to bring back some Anam energy, which is better than, not bringing back any.
Oh, you brought back some Anam energy. Tell me, Lenice, are we in the business of getting some Anam energy, or are we in the business of getting as much Anam energy as we can? What do you think?
It's Linnet, and I think that
Oh, I don't care what your name is. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is getting as much Anam energy as we can. Your thoughts and opinions don't matter. Results matter. If this problem persists, I may have to fire some of you so we can recruit some real talent. Now, does anyone have plans on how to deal with the magical boys? Huh?
The silence in the room dug into Linnet's nerves. It was quite hard to breathe as Cyrene glared hard into each of the three. Perhaps it was because she had just gotten in trouble, or maybe it was her own insecurity, but it almost looked like Cyrene set her angry expression on her longer than anyone else. Slowly, Linnet raised a hand a little. Once again, Nixie made a noise that sounded like "nuh-uh" with her closed mouth. It was too late, because Cyrene settled her attention right on her. A wicked and fake smile covered her face. Cyrene laced her fingers together, propped her elbows up, and then rested her chin on the backs of her fingers.
Oh, yay! More thoughts and opinions from Latrice.
Her name is Linnet.
Whatever. Spit it out, Linnet. What is your idea?
Well, during each of our missions, we have to fight the Sparkle Guardians, and there are 3 of them.
There are 3 of them? No! You don't say!
I think that maybe if we, being the three of us, work together to fight them, we may have a better chance of defeating them, rather than us fighting individually or with the two of us. Maybe if we had hench Nymphians too, we could have numbers on our sides.
Cyrene narrowed her eyes, and then she let out a slight huff. The mocking smile faded from between her cheeks, and she stared harder at Linnet, so much so that Linnet felt the urge to squirm in her seat. Alfreda and Nyxie kept switching their gazes between Linnet and Cyrene.
You three working together isn't a bad idea. But as for giving you all minions of your own, or actual staff to serve as hench Nymphians, it would be an enormous expense on the budget. Those two might be deserving of consideration of such a thing. Maybe. But not you, Linnet. However, let's focus on your first point. Maybe having you all three working on something to stop the Sparkle Guardians could work. Alfreda, since you have the most experience, you're in charge. You have, 3 days to give me a proposal. Otherwise, I'm firing one of you. I'm sure you can guess who that might be.
Hot acid splashed inside Linnet's throat, and she felt the color drain from her face. For just a moment, Cyrene smiled again.
Go! Get out. 3 days will pass before you know it.
Alfreda was the first to get up, followed by Nyxie. Linnet ran after them, and she finally caught up with both of them about 50 feet away from the Citadel commander's office door. A vicious sneer had creased on Alfreda's face, while Nyxie averted her eyes from looking at any one person in particular. As soon as Linnet matched her stride, Alfreda wheeled to face her.
You know you made it much harder for yourself, right? You should have just kept quiet.
Yeah, I mean, we'll do our best, but you're probably gonna get fired.
The billowing that had been building up in Linnet's chest finally overpowered her, and a few tears trickled down her cheeks. The hardness in Alfreda's face softened a little, and Nyxie winced more profoundly.
Crying isn't going to get you out of this situation. As Nyxie said, we'll do our best. The problem is that the Sparkle Guardians are very powerful, and any plan to overcome them will need to be expertly thought out, researched, and well executed.
Researched? So, in order to defeat the Magical Boys, it would help us to have lots of information about them, right?
Yes. I mean, I'm sure we could research the mission reports and any surveillance footage we have of them, but that could take a lot of time. We would be cutting it really close if that's what we're thinking about doing.
Yes, I agree. It will certainly eat up a lot of time trying to research all that information and then coming up with strategies to defeat them. If we start right now, we may be able to come up with something on the day of. I hate cutting it that close.
Actually, we might be able to bypass all of that. I know someone who has, intimate knowledge about them.
You do? Who?
Well, it's Elvinia, my friend from R&D. If we ask her for help and treat her to lunch, then she might be able to help us.
Huh, interesting. Let's go see her now.
So, you want to know about the Kaibashi triplets? That really cool J-pop band, huh?
Linnet and Elvinia sat on one side of a booth at Anthony's, while Nyxie and Alfreda sat on the other side of the table. They were in their human appearances thanks to the use of the HABs. It was 3:37 p.m., and there weren't a lot of people in the restaurant at the time. The booth they sat in was at the back of the restaurant.
You know, the Kaibashi triplets. The ones who sparkle on stage.
Yes, we want to know about the J-pop band. I am curious why you know so much about them.
Oh, so Linnet didn't tell you?
No, she just said you had an intimate knowledge about them.
That's interesting. Well, the why I know so much isn't important. What is important is what I know. Can we just focus on that, please? Thank you.
Fine. What can you tell me about the,
Kaibashi triplets. Well, I can tell you quite a bit. They consist of 3 members, Zip Zap, Splashy Splash, and Grunge.
Zip, zap, gold. Splashy splash, blue? And I suppose grunge is black.
Yep, that's right. Now, let me start off with Zip Zap. They prefer they-them pronouns, and they're very charismatic, but also quite shy when it comes to getting attention from others. Whenever the other 2 joke about relationship stuff, Zip Zap gets flustered. I'm not sure if there's a love connection or not, but they get all weird about it.
Okay, hold on. How do you know all that kind of stuff? Where do you even get that kind of info?
It doesn't matter how or why she knows. Elvinia just knows, okay? Stop trying to figure her out and listen to details. We may be able to work out a plan on how to defeat them, okay?
Fine.
I know that Zip Zap prefers they-them because when they're not around, that is how the other 2 refer to Zip Zap. I will say that I monitor all your missions, as well as other things. And no, you can't have access to my files. Anyway, as we know, Zip Zap prefers medium to long-distance combat, and they throw their javelin. When enemies get too close, they resort to stabbing, and while there is still voltage, the effects and damage is lessened significantly.
Really? That's interesting. So maybe focus on close combat or surrounding Zip Zap.
I didn't know about the power of their weapon having a lessened effect in melee.
I remember when we, hung out, and you had called forth all your brothers. Zip Zap seemed a little more flustered than, Splishy Splash? Splishy Splash.
Yes, I sort of remember that. I also remember that I'm sorry. Their lightning didn't blow up like the walls.
That's because once those javelins are thrown, they become exploding projectiles. In melee range, they just stab and shock you.
I didn't know that either. Let's avoid getting exploded. Yes.
Right. Is there anything else you can tell us about Zip Zap?
Yes. Of all 3, they are the weakest physically, but they're the most nimble and light. There are other biological things about Zap Zap that are unimportant. Whenever Zap Zap throws a javelin, it takes 2 seconds for it to reappear in their hands. And then there's 1 second cooldown before they can toss the javelin again. Once thrown, the weapon spirals with magic, and it hits with excessive and amplified force. To simplify, it would be best if we ensured that Zip Zap doesn't throw.
What can you tell us about Splishy Splash?
Oh. Oh, where do I begin with that one?
Both Alfreda's and Nixie's expressions descended into flat, vexed expressions, as if they could somehow sense the depth of Elvinia's fangirl depravity. Linnet had not told them, nor did she intend to. Linnet giggled into her hands, but still, Nixie and Alfreda glared harder at the Arcanist.
For starters, Splashy Splash is the most masculine and gung-ho male of the 3. He's the strongest physically, and he likes to assert his dominance through heroic acts and overpowering endeavors. He has an ego, as well as an exploitable arrogance. I've noticed that he has a temper, too.
An ego, arrogance, and temper? Huh. So, malicious and mean-spirited and taunting. Yes?
I'm not very good at witty banter, taunting, and the like.
Good for you all. I am a snarky little taunter if I do say so myself.
That may aid you well in fighting him. Let's move on to his weapon, yeah? The Trident. Splashy Splash is dangerous because he is great at both medium range and close combat. When he shoots out water from the ends of his tips... it's pressurized and icy. You're all lucky none of you have ever been hit by his streams.
Wow! Wait, so pressurized and cold? How cold are we talking?
On average, the temperature of the water is between 25 and 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Prolonged exposure to the stream could send your body into hypothermia. That is, if the force of the pressurized water didn't break your bones instantly, which they are strong enough to do.
Yes, whenever he fights my clay golems, his water smashes them pretty easily.
You also mentioned that he's good at close range?
Yes, the trident is sharp, and he's very strong, and skilled in using it.
Okay, what about the last one? Grunge, was it?
Yes, Grunge. Grunge is an interesting case, because he doesn't have any flashy attacks. What makes him dangerous is that he can turn invisible. I'd say that Grunge is the most intelligent, the most cunning, and the one most likely to outthink you. He's a strategist. In terms of physical attributes, he is middle of the road between the three. I've noticed when he lowers the visor on his helmet, his invisibility activates. However, he can still be detected via motion sensing, heat sensory scans, and other forms of radar location.
Elvinia stopped speaking when the server returned with their food. Once the young human male was gone, they started to speak once more.
They are all quite formidable and have great team dynamics. Zip Zap covers the long and medium range, Splashy Splash covers medium and close range, and Grunge will try to flank us. How do we approach defeating them?
No one had any real ideas as they started to eat. They shared their meals, which created a nice and pleasant spread of options. Alfreda ordered a veggie sandwich with no meat. Nixie had gotten a pastrami sandwich, and Elvinia wanted a hamburger with fries. Linnet requested a Reuben sandwich. She had gotten halfway through the sandwich when an idea popped in her head. It was such a small idea at first, but the more she thought about it, the better it got.
Hey, Elvinia, do you remember that pad you had me stand on? The one that made an illusion of me?
The projection pad? Sure. Why?
Could you make one that teleports? Similar to how we teleport to this dimension from the Citadel, but more like a trap?
A trap? You mean for the J-pop band?
Yes. I was thinking how you mentioned they have great teamwork and all, but what if we split them up? Could we take them on individually?
One by one, Elvinia's, Alfreda's, and Nixie's eyes lit up, and they nodded in succession.
Yes, that is something to consider. If I was alone with Zip Zap, I'm certain I could overwhelm them with my clay soldiers.
I have enough vape spells that I could dodge and keep away from Splashy Splash's attacks while I piss him off. I could maybe even wear him down with some paralysis and mind-affecting vapes. There is one problem with your plan.
I know, that leaves me with Grunge.
No offense, but you are kinda weak when it comes to physical fighting. Do you really think you'd be able to beat him on your own? I'm not trying to be a bitch or anything, but you're not very strong and you don't have any offensive spells. Just songs that affect people.
Yes, I know I'm kind of the weakest link at the Citadel, but I'm trying. Even if he's invisible, I can still affect him with my songs, and Elvinia said he could be tracked with motion sensing and other stuff, so if I get some tech from her, I should be okay.
Of course she'll be okay, because I'll be on site to fight him too.
You will?
Certainly. You've already proven yourself to be a loyal, trustworthy friend. And I wouldn't let you face this alone. Besides, I can provide you all tech to aid you in your fights.
Oh yeah? What kind of tech?
I wouldn't use a teleporter pad trap, as that would be too easy to spot. But I can rig something to shoot teleporting darts at the Sparkle Guardians to take them elsewhere. If we did isolate them and fight them one at a time, it would detract from their cohesion. We might be able to beat them this time. For Zip Zap, I would use several lightning rod type devices to make their weapon even more hampered.
That would be most appreciated.
As for Splashy Splash, I could engineer a sort of fog machine that will fill the air with special fog.
Ooh. Why is it special?
I have designs for microscopic nanoconstructs that can saturate the fog. They could fly into Splashy Splash's mouth to get into his lungs. Once inside his body, they could wear him down and make him more susceptible to your vape spells. The constructs could even affect his biochemistry and make him even more pissed off. If you want to go dark with it, we could even have the constructs break down his cells.
Wow. Sounds diabolical. I love it.
I mean, supporting Linnet will be super easy. I can just set up motion and heat sensors and keep him at bay while Linnet sings him into a stupor. Then, we could end him at our convenience.
Are you sure you're going to be okay with all this? You seem to really know them well. And maybe like them a bit too.
Oh, they'll live on in my stories, so it's fine.
Your what?
You know what? Who wants dessert? We just came up with a badass plan, so we should celebrate. Dessert's on me.
And then, my bastard supervisor tells me I should start showing more initiative. Can you believe that? I put a ridiculous amount of time at work. It's not my fault people aren't buying insurance. The market is saturated.
Tyler, Frankie, and Nicholas sat at the bar at Anthony's. It was late afternoon and everyone was off of work. Tyler had already pounded down a couple bottles of beer, and he was feeling very feisty. Frankie drank a single beer, and they were on their second one, while Nicholas hadn't touched his beer yet. His eyes weren't focused on his two best friends, but he listened.
I'm sorry, man. It really sucks to have a boss bust your chops constantly. I'm feeling the pressure too, so I get it.
Oh, did you manage to get your project completed in time?
Yeah, I managed to finish it, but my team lead says I should have completed it earlier. I guess everyone is feeling stressed. The higher-ups at my firm are encouraging us to take on more projects to bring more credibility and clout to our agency as a whole.
Well, at least they appear to care about you guys. To my bosses, I'm nothing more than a number. One that either brings more money in or one that's broken. At the moment, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to meet this month's quota.
I'm really sorry to hear that, man.
Tyler gave Nicholas a hard scowl, which stopped Frankie from whatever they were about to say. They just kept looking between Tyler and Nicholas, confused. Even Nicholas was taken aback, and his eyebrows raised slightly.
What? Why are you looking at me like that?
Here, lately, whenever Frankie or I talk about our jobs and our future, I've noticed you get real quiet. You don't bring up your graduation, which is a pretty big deal. I know you've been working hard on your thesis since you finished your undergrad, but you haven't talked much about that either.
I didn't want to bore you two with my subject matter. That's why I've not brought it up.
Oh, that's bullshit, and you know it. We've been friends since middle school, and whenever you have something bothering you, you get quiet.
It's true. You have been awfully quiet these last few months. I've noticed it for a while, but I didn't want to press the matter until you felt ready.
Well, screw that. I'm pressing. We're best friends, and we're teammates. We have to communicate with each other, or we're going to trip and fail, so spill it, Nikki. What's going on?
Tyler tightened his jaw muscles, and he glared at one of his longtime best friends. Frankie propped their elbow on the bar and rested their chin in their palm.
You know Tyler's just gonna keep on you until you finally tell us, right? And you know you're not leaving until you do.
Oh, listen, it's not that big a deal.
Ah, so there is something going on.
As you both know, I'm getting my master's degree in gemology. There are a couple of career paths I can take after I get it. One option is to get employed with a jeweler or some sort of gem company, and the other is... well, the other...
To be accepted into a doc program? Is that why you're feeling upset?
I wouldn't say that I'm upset.
Fine. How about affected? Is this why you're affected?
Well, yes. The thing is, I've applied to a bunch of doctoral programs all over the country because the university here doesn't have a PhD program I want to pursue.
Are you upset that you didn't get into any programs?
Actually, I got into 3. including the school I really wanted to get into.
Wait, isn't that a good thing? Where is the school?
It's the University of Thanatos.
Frankie turned their attention to the door.
Wait, the University of Thanatos. Isn't that like 1,000 miles away? Did you just get in, or did you get any kind of offer?
Full funding for a doctoral program, a stipend, and room and board.
So were you not gonna tell us? When are you leaving?
I haven't decided if I'm going yet.
Okay, that's more bullshit. You want to go because you applied and they're going to pay you. When were you going to tell us?
Guys?
I was going to tell you. I just didn't know.
Guys, look at me!
Tyler and Nicholas both looked at Frankie, and then Tyler felt something on the air. It was like a sort of static energy pulsating from somewhere. Ever since they had first been granted their Sparkle Guardian powers, from mysterious inner voices, they had been able to sense weird energy vibrations in the air. Those vibrations were usually caused by the Nymphians, either by their weird magical technology or through the harvesting of soul energy.
What is that?
I was wondering when those creepy little fairy children were going to do another dastardly plot. I'm ready to go when you all are.
Okay, but we're going to talk about this later.
They paid for their meal and they walked outside. They moved deep into the closest alley, away from the prying eyes of normal people. Tyler took out a golden drachma with the image of a cresting wave on it. Frankie pulled out a drachma with a lightning bolt on it, and Nicholas pulled out a drachma with the image of a skull on it. They all nodded, and then they willed their magic into their coins.
Zeus, sparkling power!
Poseidon, sparkling power!
Hades, sparkling power!
Nicholas and Frankie were surrounded by their own nimbuses of light, as was Tyler. He never asked what they saw when they transformed. Brilliant azure light swirled around him as if he were in a whirlpool vortex. His clothes disappeared, and his Sparkle Guardian outfit shimmered onto him. His trusty trident manifested in his hands. Tyler loved holding his weapon and being a Sparkle Guardian. When he fought as Sparkle Guardian Poseidon, there were no quotas, obligations, or supervisors breathing down their neck. There was only ass-kicking, and he was good at that for sure. As the light faded, the three of them stood together.
Let's find the Nymphians and stop them before they can enact whatever injustice they're planning.
I have a lot of aggression to work out, so I'm down.
Tyler glared at Nicholas before chasing after Frankie. Nicholas didn't say anything, which was fine by Tyler. How could Nicholas keep something like that from Tyler and Frankie? They were friends. But also, if Nicholas left, what would that do to the team? When united together, they were strong. But if they were separated, would they be overcome by the Nymphians? The more that Tyler thought about an absent Nicholas, the more sick his stomach became. They already rarely saw one another outside of Sparkle Guardian duties, and for the brief and fleeting lunches here and there. Back in school, they were always around one another. Those were the golden days of their youth and their friendship. Frankie, Tyler, and Nicholas followed the trail of weird vibrations, all the way to a warehouse in the industrial part of town. The warehouse was a large, multi-floored building with a single metal door at the front. All the windows were closed, but the front door was wide open.
That doesn't seem ominous at all.
That does seem strange.
Should I sneak in and scout it out?
So, you're just going to leave us behind while you go off and do your own thing. Is that a hint of what's to come?
Nicholas balled his fists and he started to step toward Tyler. Maybe it was because of the beer he had drank, or how his heart brimmed with bubbling betrayal. But Tyler stepped up too. Frankie stepped between them.
Stop it, both of you! Now is not the time to be fighting. We're all going in there side by side, so no one gets left behind and left exposed.
Yeah, we're a team, so no one should be left behind. We need to act as one.
Tyler moved toward the front entrance, and he heard Nicholas say something. It sounded like, asshole, but Tyler didn't care. Frankie said something coddling, but then they both caught up with him. Frankie was to his left, while Nicholas was on the other side of him. They walked into the warehouse. It was eerily quiet. The sensation of power had gotten stronger, and it was emanating from within this room. There was a strange series of whistles, and something pricked into the back of Tyler's arm.
Ow! Something bit me.
Tyler turned to look at them, but a nimbus of light had engulfed them. Tyler's body started to glow too, and when he blinked, everything became white. The white flashing stopped, and Frankie stood in the cement basement of a large building. The top of the basement had to have been 30 or 40 feet above them, and small square windows were at ground level towards the top of the ceiling. It was grimly dark, and there were several stone columns that went from floor to ceiling to serve as support for the floors above. There were long fluorescent lights lining the basement, but numerous shadows crawled around the columns, where the lights couldn't reach. There were a couple of tall, thin metal objects, with small balls at the top tips. The air saturated with malice.
Poseidon? Hades? Are you here too?
As an answer, several dozen clay soldiers moved out from behind the columns. Frankie's heart lurched in their chest as they started to charge energy into their javelin. As the javelin illuminated with electricity, the unknown metal objects began to shine with an ethereal light. The balls at the tips radiated the brightest, and beams of energy stretched down to touch the javelin. Suddenly, the lightning magic was gone. A clay soldier punched Frankie in the face, and the force was strong enough they fell back. Something grabbed Frankie from behind, and they twisted their body around with all the strength they could muster. Another clay soldier was behind them and had grabbed them. The soldier went flying, and Frankie looked behind them. There were more soldiers there, and they started trying to grab them or strike out at them with clay weapons. Once more, Frankie willed energy into their weapon, but the metal objects stole the power. Frankie dodged another clay fist. They jabbed their javelin into the body of the soldier who attacked, but the tip merely slid off of the surface, leaving a thick groove within the clay. Frankie tried to get away, but the clay soldiers surrounded them and held their arms together to form a kind of cage. It was hard to breathe as dozens of legs and feet came toward them in rapid, coordinated succession. This wasn't like any of the other Nymphian plots. There was no Anam Energy Collection scheme, only a plan with gruesome intentions. Frankie's body started tingling as they did their best to block and get past the unending series of kicks. One of the feet caught them in the ribs, and pain shot up Frankie's senses. Another clipped them in the kneecap, and they fell. The soldiers got closer and stood over Frankie. All together, they started stomping upon them. Frankie screamed, but there wasn't an end.
Is that all you punk asses got? Come on! Come fight me!
When the flash of light stopped, Tyler found himself in the middle of a massive fog cloud. He took in small breaths, and the air had a foul taste about it. His tongue wiggled in his mouth as a metallic and bitter flavor covered his taste buds. His throat started to dry up.
Hey. Sound off. Woohoo! You guys, can either of you hear me?
No, they can't hear you. You're all going to die. Alone.
The voice had come from somewhere in the fog, although Tyler couldn't rightly identify where. He swung out his trident in wide arcs, hoping to hit something.
Shut up! What did you do with my friends?
No matter how hard he stared into the fog, he couldn't see anything.
We already killed them. They called out for you, begging for help. If you were a real man, you would have been able to save them.
That's bullshit! There's no way you stupid Nymphians could take us down! We're too strong!
Tyler's head started to spin, and he gritted his teeth and started shooting streams of water into the fog. The stream blasted through, making a narrow window, but he didn't hit anything, even at max range. If he could just find some kind of landmark, he would be able to get his bearings. The Nymphian laughed again.
That's so pathetic. Are you trying to hit me?
Tyler started moving around in a circle and sprayed his water all around him. Still nothing. The tips of his fingers started to tingle. A cloud of dark brown mist started to surround him from a specific point, and so Tyler lunged. He thrusted his trident in the center, where the mist was coming from, and it stopped before the tip went through that spot. Tyler landed before it, and the Nymphian looked up at him with wide eyes. She ducked under a horizontal shaft strike, and she blew more dark brown mist into his face. Tyler closed his mouth, but the mist stung his eyes. He barely missed hitting her again. The Nymphian backflipped into the fog and disappeared. Tyler shot a stream of water into the fog, but he didn't hit her. His lungs burned every time he inhaled.
A real man would have gotten me.
Screw you! Come out and fight me, fair and square!
Green mist floated up from behind him, and he looked down at it. It smelled like green apples. He gasped a little and flipped around. Once more, he blasted water streams into the fog behind him. But once more, nothing. He dropped his trident, not by his own will. Tyler's hand shook violently, and his knees buckled under him. He fell to a knee. The Nymphian walked out of the mist, gazed right into his eyes, and then blew out cyan-colored vape mist into his face. His whole body tensed up like a fist. Well, this was a bad sign. Nicholas was in a pitch-black room, and he waved his hands in hopes of finding a light switch or something. Something light and thin brushed against his arm, and Nicholas grabbed it. It was a string, and so he yanked on it. A light came on, and he found himself in a janitor's closet. The door to the closet wasn't locked, and he exited the small room. His two friends were not in sight, and perhaps calling out to them was exactly what the enemy wanted. He reached back and felt the little object still jutting from the back of his neck. With a slight tug, Nicholas pulled it free and examined it in his hand. The thing that had bitten him was a tiny little dart with a small needle. Nicholas lowered his visor over his eyes, and the world began warbling around him. He saw through the visor, and his surroundings had taken on a gray appearance. While he walked invisibly, everything was gray, black, and white. Slowly, Nicholas moved down the hallway. The words Elmfield High School were painted across one of the walls, above the rows of lockers. While he, Tyler, and Frankie went to another school, this school had been one of their rivals. The classrooms were dark, save for one at the very end of the hallway. Dread soaked Nicholas's stomach, but he pushed that unease away. He had to find his friends and make sure that they were okay. When he got to the classroom, Nicholas stood at a T-intersection with another hallway going to his right. There was another classroom with its lights on, and as soon as he glanced towards it, the class beside him went dark.
Oh, great. Just great.
Nicholas walked over to the second classroom, and its lights shut off as another one's turned on from down the hall. The process repeated until he found his way to the gymnasium. The gym doors weren't locked, and the lights were on inside. An individual waited in the very center of the gym, the newest Nymphian who sang. She looked around nervously, and she held her hands close to her body. What was she doing all alone? Nicholas gazed all around at the bleachers, but he didn't see anyone else. His blood festered within him. The Nymphian jerked her head around and looked at the opposite direction, on the far side of the gym. She pulled out what appeared to be a knife, and she held it out in front of her in the direction of her gaze. Nicholas followed her gaze, and he kept his breath held tightly. Nicholas saw nothing, but the Nymphian appeared spooked as she was shaking. Nicholas took soft steps onto the floor of the gym, and he closed the distance between himself and the Nymphian. She had not started singing yet, and if he could just grab her from behind, he could... A weird thwomp noise broke the air, somewhere behind him. Nicholas stayed very still. Something cold, wet, and sticky struck the back of one of his boots. Nicholas looked down. A shimmering glob of bluish goo covered the back of his boot and the floor. He tried to pull his leg free, but his boot remained locked in place. A white-hot panic wiggled up Nicholas's throat as he looked in the direction from where the goop had come. Another Nymphian, one he had never seen before, stood between the benches and the bleachers. She had a long staff with a jeweled headpiece, and she had a visor over her eyes. The Nymphian stared right at him. As Nicholas tried to pull his leg free, another glob struck his other foot, locking it in place.
Now, Linnet! Now!
Linnet turned around. She was still nervous, but not frightened like Nicholas had assumed. Linnet opened her mouth. The tune that danced on the air was truly haunting, and Nicholas covered both of his ears with his hands. Something cuffed onto his right wrist. The Nymphian with the wand had another object in her grip. It was an opened clam-shaped object with a long neon orange lasso stretching from it. One end had tangled around Nicholas's wrists, and the lasso slowly started to pull towards the clam-shaped device. Nicholas fought the best he could, but his bound arm became tightly secured to his side. The dreadful lullaby of promised doom slipped into his exposed ear, and Nicholas's body vibrated with a sort of looseness. His eyes started to blur, and his other arm fell to his side lifelessly. Slowly, Linnet walked up to him with knife in hand. She had a sad pout on her face, and within her eyes danced conflict. However, Nicholas knew that conflict wasn't going to stop what was about to happen.
So, this is it? This is how my story ends.
Damn. I failed. I failed my friends, and I failed myself.
I have to fight this somehow. Not like this.
It doesn't have to end, Frankie.
You're not giving up, are you? Are you gonna be a little punk-ass bitch?
You got this. Don't falter. You can overcome.
Who are you?
What the hell did you just say to me?
I don't know who you three are, but I'm spent. I can't do anything.
I'm you. But I'm also the source of your power. Embrace me, and let's show these Nymphians what we can really do.
You heard what I said. Now, are you gonna lie down and die? Or are you gonna dig deep, grasp your real power, and be a man?
You are not spent. You have us. Let go of your fear, embrace us, and let us stand with you.
Another clay knuckle dug into Frankie's cheek. Yet this time, it didn't hurt. Their body began glowing, and it crackled with storm-worthy power. Not only did that power course into their javelin, but it filtered into their limbs too. Frankie stood up, and they swung their javelin around in a wide circle. When their javelin touched one of the clay soldiers, the soldier exploded. Multiple streams touched their body, all coming from the large metal siphoning devices in the room. Frankie grinned, for they knew somehow they weren't getting dampened this time. They collected all of their magic inside them, and they pushed it out as hard as they could. Lightning bolts shot out from them in a wild display, and the streams flowing into the devices became quite fat. Frankie looked around them and noticed the massive energy mantle of a gigantic thunderbird surrounded them. The bird shrieked, and the electric energy surged more potently. The metal devices exploded moments later. The Nymphian peeked around one of the corners of the cement columns, but then disappeared in a flash of light. Tyler stood emerging from the cyan vapor mist. The Nymphian stepped back as her eyes widened in horror. Tyler's skin began glowing with a bright azure hue. Intense water blasted from his body, going out in all directions. The force was powerful enough to blast to the Nymphian back as a result. The water seemed to spin above him in a gravity-defying whirlpool, and it took shape. The visage of a massive stallion, made from the sea itself, stood above him. Its equine eyes were on the soaking wet Nymphian, who stood 100 feet away. The machines that made the fog lay broken on the floor, drenched in the previous magical attack. The stallion of the sea breathed in and released a powerful stream of water. Just before it hit the Nymphian disappeared in a flash of light. The Nymphian Linnet stopped singing, and she gaped at Nicholas with wide eyes.
What's going on?
I don't know, but the power ratings are crazy.
A profound power awoke within Nicholas, and his body started crackling with black magical power. The goo that bound his legs started to wither and dissolve, and he rose to a full stand. A new presence appeared behind him, as if out of nowhere, and both Nymphians drifted their gazes upward. Nicholas followed their gaze. A massive, three-headed black Dachshund stood above them, with their eyes centered on the pair of Nymphians. The one named Linnet started to sing, but the three-headed dog barked. The sound was loud enough her singing was drowned out. All at once, the three heads zipped down and tried to snap at the Nymphians. The Nymphians jumped out of the way and scrambled across the gym floor. Cerberus chased after them comically as its long body hobbled along. The Nymphians disappeared moments later in flashes of white. Once they were gone, Cerberus bounded back to Nicholas, wagged its tail, and bent down to give him 3 happy licks. The dog faded moments later. Nicholas's cell phone rang, and he reached into his coat pocket to pull it out.
Hey, are you okay? Y'all got separated.
Yeah, I almost died. But then something crazy happened.
Something crazy happened to us, too. I already spoke to Tyler. We're going to meet on the rooftop of the tool shop near Anthony's. Are you all right to meet us there?
Yeah, I'll meet you there.
And then all this water came rushing out of me. The next thing I know, I had this massive horse made of water over me. It scared that little Nymphian punk away. Woo!
Yours is a horse? Mine is a thunder eagle or something.
And mine is a dreaded 3-headed wiener dog of death.
A wiener dog? Bruh, that's sick! Our new powers are awesome! There's no way those stupid Nymphians can beat us now.
A sudden weight settled in Nicholas's stomach, and he averted his eyes from the group. The moisture in his mouth evaporated, and every breath he took in felt laden with sickness.
Listen, I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the PhD program before. I was just scared.
So I guess we're doing this now, okay? Why were you scared?
I was afraid of how you were going to react.
So you are deciding to go? No more beating around the bush, say it! Are you going or not?
Nicholas's heart twisted inside his chest, and yet he couldn't turn away from his goal. He bit his lip and gazed directly into Tyler's eyes.
I'm going.
So that's it, then? We don't get a say?
Come on, Tyler. Don't be that way.
We're a goddamn team, and we have been thick as thieves ever since middle school. When did that change, huh? You're just gonna leave us in a couple of months, is that it? Were you gonna tell us the week of your departure?
I have the right to choose my own future!
There was a brief moment of silence, and Tyler struck out. His hard fist slammed into Nicholas's cheek, and Nicholas fell to the ground. Frankie wrapped their arms around Tyler's neck and pulled him back.
Whoa! That is not okay!
Get off of me!
Tyler managed to wiggle out of Frankie's grasp easily, but he remained where he stood. Nicholas got to his feet, balled his fists, and then moved toward Tyler, white-hot anger flickering in his chest. Frankie moved in between them.
No!
You do whatever you want to do. I don't care. And I don't want to see you again. I'll come for Sparkle Guardian stuff, but you can forget anything else.
Tyler turned around and moved toward the metal staircase, leading down.
Tyler, come on! Tyler!
Tyler disappeared beyond the lip of the roof's edge, and a great quiet dominated the air. For a long moment, Frankie and Nicholas just stood there, not really looking at one another.
He's just mad, okay? You know how Tyler is.
Yeah, I know how he is.
I understand how he feels. I wish you would have told us you were applying. I'm happy you got accepted, but I'm gonna miss you, man.
I'm going to miss you too. Both of you.
I'll try and talk to Tyler, and we...
Don't bother. If that's how Tyler wants it, then I'll honor his wishes.
Oh, come on! You both are killing me, you know that?
Nicholas moved over to the top of the stairs, and he gave one last look to Frankie.
Call me if anything happens.
Ugh. Whatever, you both suck so much.
Nicholas walked down the stairs, into one of the alleys, taking the long way home.